Hi, Homeworthy. I'm Minnette, and this is my home in Texas. Come on in. I can't wait to show you around.
You're watching Homeworthy, where we believe every home has a story.
Hi, my name is Minnette Jackson, and I'm an interior designer in Houston, Texas. Welcome to our home. I can't wait to show you around. Well, prior to living here in Houston, my husband and I lived in Nashville for a while, which is where he's from and where I went to school. And out of nowhere, my husband got a job offer here in Houston, where I'm from, and we thought the world was telling us to come back to Houston and be with my parents for a little bit, so we did that. And what it meant was we had to move very quickly one summer. So we came here and had about equivalent of a long weekend to find a house, and we walked into this one, and at first it was a little underwhelming. I could see that it had some good bones. It was built in the 30s. It has this lovely turret in the front, kind of a nod to Tudor architecture, but it was a little overgrown. You could barely see the turret from the street, and the inside was very drab and dreary. It was dark gray, and so it was very underwhelming at first. But we found that as we kept looking, we kept comparing every house to this one. And so in the end, we went for it, and here we are. And almost 7 years later, we have slowly updated it and improved it and decorated it in a way that we really love to be and to have friends over and entertain. I would say the biggest changes that we made, given that it's a 1930s home and it's got this lovely turret out front, that we added back actually a lot of details that the previous owner had taken away. So as we walk through, you'll see I added back in elliptical casings in the living room to some of the archways where they'd stripped away original moldings and tried to, make them these big, more modern openings. And then on the exterior, we went through a huge landscaping plan. We worked with Ted Gregory Henry Landscape. He's wonderful, but he really helped us transform the outside. I'm good on the inside. I'm less good on the outside. I know it looks good, but don't ask me to help you keep a plant alive. But the way the house is situated on the street, the way you see it from the street, the way we come in and out of it and can greet our friends outside is really, really wonderful, in addition to how you see the outside from when you're sitting inside. So that was a really big impact on the house. Well, here we are in our entry. It is a little bit of an unusual space because we have this 2-story space. We're inside the turret that's on the front of our house, but the floor plan, the footprint is pretty compact. So it doesn't allow for a ton of furniture or a ton of storage. So that was a little bit of a challenge working out when we moved in, but I solved it with a beautiful antique chest that holds, if you open these drawers, they are stuffed with board games and table linens. So it is a great storage piece. And we have a little tray that catches keys and chapstick and things like that when you come in the door. Over here, I knew I needed a bench that could be a place, where guests drop their handbag or you stop and tie your shoes before you walk out the door. But again, very small footprint, and so I needed something shallow. And my dear friend, Jessica Love, she's an antique dealer. She found this beautiful antique bench for me, and I put it in this Lee Joffa fabric, and I just love it. It kind of modernizes the old, blends the two. And then my husband and I, he actually was both an art history and business major. So we do have a fun time talking about creative things and looking at art. And this is a piece we picked out together. This is by an artist, Ashley Longshore, out of New Orleans. And she, if you know her work, it is all kinds of wacky and beautiful. But we found this one and felt like it was just perfect in here. These bluebirds kind of fly about and they feel a little bit like they're flying around in this atrium, which is a really nice effect when you walk in. Over here, I have a little collection of artwork that I've collected from different people. This one is actually my grandmother that I referenced. She was a portrait artist. And this is a study she did a million years ago. This is a sweet artist out of South Carolina, Haley Matthews. And this, my dear friend Gina Julia did for me years ago, and I just love it. And then this is a lamp that was my grandmother's. So I have a little bit of everything in this very small space, but I think all of it is reflective of who we are as a family and my husband and I, how we, kind of go about collecting things. As far as colors, when we moved in this house, this was another space that was very dreary. It was gray, it was bumpy. And despite having these 2 windows, it was still kind of dreary. So we skimmed it, just gave it a nice crisp coat of white paint, so it could be just sort of the nice neutral backdrop and let a lot of light bounce around. You also look out on the outside, our landscaping that we did. And green and blue are my favorite colors. You probably see that when you look at my work, it comes out a lot. But I kind of went a little bit earthy, but still kind of made it a little bit modern. So this sort of almost a flame stitch, but it's a cut velvet, is a little bit more modern feeling against this antique bench, and the color green, nature, kind of soothing. I think of green as almost a neutral. So it looks nice with the neutral rug, with the wood tones we have over here. And then of course we've got our funky art with the floral painting. So it's bold, but it's still quite elegant. And I think they all work together very well. Another element that we added that I think really honors the age of the home and the time period it was built was adding in these openings, these elliptical arches. My fellow neighbors over here, the following, I think 3 houses all next to me are all built in the 30s, and they all have these elliptical archways in them. And when we moved in, the previous owner, they were uncased, which kind of drives me crazy. And they were segmented, and to me, they didn't feel right with the house. And so eventually I had these made to fit in here. So I have one here and one in the living room that we'll see later. And I think just when you transition from the entryway to the living room, it just feels a little bit grander, beefier. There's a little bit more of a sense of arrival, and it really works with the spirit of the home. When people walk in our home, I want them to feel welcomed. I want them to feel the same things that I try to create for my family, which is, a place that's comfortable, a place that's classic, a place that's livable. As we walk through, you'll see our main living room. I mean, we could have cocktails here one evening with a friend, but on Saturday morning, there's Legos on the floor. So nothing is too precious. And I mean, while I want it to be beautiful, I ultimately want it to be livable. And I want all my friends to feel the same thing when they come in. Now we're in our living room, and as you can see, it's a very long, narrow living room. So working out a floor plan was a little bit of a challenge, but what we did is create multiple seating areas, which I think is a wonderful thing to do if you can in a living space. So in this living room, we have this lovely little area with the settee and the 2 slipper chairs and pretty little floor lamps. At night, I love to sit here in the evening with the floor lamps on. They give the soft glow and a little cocktail. It's so nice. Another piece of art that we have that my husband and I really like is this really cool contemporary piece by Will Berry. He's actually a relative of my husband, and this was a wedding gift he gave to us. It was actually on display in a gallery in Mexico City at one time, which is a really neat tale to tell. And we really enjoy looking at it. And I think color-wise, it's very happy in this room. The drapery, fun fact, I actually did these in our old house and brought them with me. And because our new house, the ceilings are lower, 1930s house, I had them hemmed, but they're actually a stain-resistant material with which kids is excellent because you can actually sometimes wipe off whatever little grubby things your kids leave on them. And I put this really pretty Schumacher tape down the side so that it's kind of a little tone-on-tone texture on there. All of this area is this lovely collection of things I've acquired that are vintage. So I found this at an estate sale, those at an auction clearance. The floor lamps I love, I got in Paris. They're actually similar to Iatesta Studio. And then the slipper chairs, I actually found on Cherish, and I had them recovered in another stain-resistant velvet and put on this beautiful Samuel & Sons trim. And they are just very elegant, but still very livable with a family with little kids. So it's just a really cozy little spot to be. And a nice thing about the way the seating areas are arranged is that even if you're sitting over here, you can very easily talk to everyone sitting over here in the main area. So when we have grandparents in town and friends over, we can fit everyone and we don't have to all kind of be on top of each other, but we can all talk to each other, even if we're all spread out, which is really nice. So we have this really big, comfy sofa with, fluffy pillows. I've got all my tones of velvet. I always like to have a little velvet. This chair was actually in my husband's family, and I recovered it in this beautiful green floral. I love green and blue together, so you'll see that a lot. And over here, I've got a little collections of things that I've either inherited or found. So I found this beautiful mirror at an estate sale. These plates were actually my grandmother's. So another little piece that reminds me of her. And we have tons of books. So we collect art books and design books and fashion books, all kinds of things. So we've got a lot of that to look at as well. The slipper chairs I found through an estate sale, and I just love them. I've always loved the slope of them. They're kind of old school, but still very modern at the same time to me, especially in this sort of almost lacquered black finish. And you'll also notice I have layered some rugs in here. I put a hide on top of this very long rug. So this room is about, I think, 28 feet long. And it's not really the type of room that you could put two different rugs in and make it work. So I have one long continuous rug, and I put this hide because it's a little amorphous. It's not so rigid. And it just helps break up the space and add another layer of texture. And it's super durable with kids and a dog. So it has served us well. Once we moved in the house and I was working through colors, I felt this room called for a nice soft blue, and I tried many because blue is for some a hard color to nail down. If it's too light, it looks baby blue. If it's too dark, can kind of look a little stale. And I found this color. It is a discontinued, but you can still have it mixed if you ask the right person. It's Pittsburgh Paint Limoges Blue, and I think during the day it is just this lovely kind of light and airy color, but at night it just really gets nice and dusty, and with the lamplight on, it's really lovely to be here in the evening with friends, or even with the kids, hanging out. And as we walk through the living room, you will see we're starting to get closer to the dining room, and I felt that the space needed to open up a little more so that we could have a transition. So over here is where I have this lovely console. It was in my husband's family. It's beautifully carved, marble top. And I've kind of modernized it with some brass lamps and kind of a wall mirror that's a little bit of a nod to a Carl Springer. It's kind of a fuchsia green. And then our sweet dog Lola taking her nap below. And then you have this open space here, which allows you to kind of move nicely into the dining room. This is actually a gramophone cabinet that was my husband's grandfather's, and he had it converted into a bar, which is kind of fun to have in here. And up above, I have a collection of, these were plates that were my grandmother's. I found that lovely little painting of the moon at night from an antique dealer, and some big jars. And I think that they look really nice with all the blue and white, and it's kind of a nice layer on top of this tall piece. And then as we keep going, I love my skirted table. I usually have the same assortment of things on here, kind of like my stacks of books, but every now and then the objects do change. So for example, I've slowly collected a few of these precious little malachite boxes. I do love to open them up. This one's so pretty on the inside with its gilded interior. And then this pretty little antique book with fish in it. My husband is a fisherman, and this one has these really beautiful engravings in it that are nice to look at. And a skirted table is great for hiding all kinds of things. So I have a handful of vases and some yoga mats hiding under there. So pro tip, that's a good thing to have if you need a little extra storage. Over here, I've got a couple little things that kind of are a nod to our tendency to collect. This is a painting I found on a trip to Paris with one of my very dear friends. I bought this for my husband for his birthday, and it's got all these wonderful things. He loves oysters and crawfish and port, and I just thought it was so wonderful. So he gets to see it every day, as do I. I bought this chair from a wonderful antique dealer that I love at the Antiques and Garden Show in Nashville. And this artist right here is Summers Randolph. He is in Tennessee, and he just carves these amazing pieces out of wood and marble and alabaster, and we're lucky to have one of them. So now we'll head on into the dining room, which is not far away. Well, decorating your own home is infinitely, it is 100 million times harder than decorating for a client or designing for a client. Fundamentally, you start with the same parameters. You have floor plans that can only accommodate so much furniture or so many built-ins or what have you. And you have some sense of a budget. How much are you willing to spend? So those two things you kind of start with the same. However, a client usually have a timeline, and they usually have some parameter in terms of what they want their house to feel like. For me, I'm always looking, I am always searching, I am always finding and discovering. And so I always make these little pivots when I am designing my own home, and it is very hard to come to a final answer for anything I do. But sometimes it's aggravating for myself because I just want to make a decision, but then sometimes you end up finding just this little gem that you hadn't thought about because you had the time to go look and discover and find. And that is fun, even though sometimes it can be a little draining. And here we are in the dining room. As you can see, the opening to the living room is pretty big, so they're very open to each other. One thing that I did in here that I'm very happy we did, I showed you in the entry how we added the elliptical arch. We did the same thing here. This opening was actually over 2 feet wider than it is now, and I just felt like I had this runway of furniture, and it drove me nuts. So I actually made the opening a little smaller. It's still very big, and added this elliptical arch in. And again, it just makes the transition feel a little bit more special. And the house feels more substantial, and I think that the design element suits the house really well. In here, I have on the walls this lovely paper weave wallpaper. It's actually a vinyl, so it's wipeable, which is nice. And these beautiful panels that are de Gournay. I mentioned my friend Jessica Love, the antique dealer. She used to source these beautiful vintage panels, and she found these for me. And when I saw them, it was just, I didn't really have this room quite figured out, but it just clicked. That clicked with the blue in the living room. I knew I wanted to use these chairs that I'd had in our previous home, and they just all sung together. So I knew it was meant to be. And they're a nice gold silk with the hand-painted chinoiserie kind of design. And I think they kind of glow when the light is just right, which is really, really pretty when you're in here having a meal. So the mirror here is also something I found in Paris. On the same trip, I found my other painting with my good friend. And then this fun little piece of art, my grandmother, who was the antique dealer, she actually had lots of artist friends and would trade art with other friends. So this is a piece she traded with another artist, and I now have it now. So I kind of love knowing that about it, in addition to thinking that it's really quite beautiful. Another fun piece, I found these stools at a thrift store, and I just like, wow, they're really a little bit bold and gilded, but I just knew I could add this cushion and it was going to look great in front of these panels, and it did. So again, kind of a little bit when you're designing for yourself, there's always this little bit of the element of the unknown, and you find something that just works in a way you hadn't really mapped out for yourself. And it's usually comes together really well if you let yourself have that opportunity. I do love to entertain. I love to set a table. My friends joke it's maybe like another love language I have. I think, I talked about holidays with my grandparents and my mother, and how the table was always a really important part of those gatherings. And so I guess I just carry on that tradition. And this is chock full of china, placemats, all the things. And so it's kind of a little micro way to be really creative, but it's temporary, and you can mix and match and do all kinds of fun things. So I went a little green here for you guys, and I mixed the chargers from our wedding china, The dinner plate is actually a discontinued Dior china. They don't make it anymore. The Dior malachite that I collected one by one over the years. And then these pretty sweet floral plates were actually my grandmother's. And so it's really nice to mix all those different time periods and, kind of the modern with the really traditional, and it all works. Another layer on the table, I do love rattan. So I have these really fun octagonal rattan chargers and these pretty napkin rings, which kind of going with my love of green is like green is a neutral, so is rattan. And I think you can mix, your fine silver and china with all of it, and it works really well. These are, nice hem stitch green linens. This was my maternal grandmother, and then these candlesticks were actually my paternal grandmother. So I've got a little bit of them in everything I do. The green goblets I found at an estate sale, but I only got 6 of them. And I went down an internet rabbit hole until I found 4 more on eBay. So now I have a set of 10, and it's very exciting. Some other pieces of china that are really fun to me. This is the cabinet of china. And fun to set a table with. I do love these pretty Madaheta sacred bird. I just think they're so fun and such a beautiful shade of orange, which is a color I don't really decorate very often with. And then I also love these heron green fish scale. They come out quite a bit. These were part of our wedding china, and they're fun to use and think about how long we've had them. The chandelier I love. It is a little bit of a statement. It's a little big in this room, and I love it. It's kind of a little bit whimsical, a little bit modern, a little bit retro, a little bit glam. To me, it really finishes the room nicely, and I like this kind of organic sweeping element, and I think it works well with kind of our viney chinoiserie panels, and the fact that I often am using, like greens and florals in some of my settings. And now we'll head into the kitchen. Follow me. Okay, well, here we are in our kitchen. As you can see, we kept it pretty light and bright and very classic. When we moved in, a selling point was that this kitchen has this huge island, and it's a pretty spacious kitchen, but again, very dreary. There were dark gray cabinets, this very dark some kind of granite countertop, and this really bright green tile. And that just did not work for us. And the walls, again, were bumpy gray. So we sort of just neutralized everything, painted all the cabinetry in the walls the same kind of creamy white, and brought in this Arabescato marble and a glazed brick backsplash. So it has a little bit of an earthy kind of textural element, but still is very classic and clean and bright and happy. Thankfully, all the cabinets were in great shape, so we kept those, and it was mostly just resurfacing. The pendants, I love. They are actually ceramic. If you touch them, they're ceramic from Duval Kitchen in England. And the faucet is also Roll, which is another English hardware maker. So again, we collect things. My husband also loves to cook, and he collects cookbooks. So this is not even all of our cookbooks that we have in our home, but this is our starting collection here. But there are all kinds, all cuisines, gotten them in different places after having visited different restaurants. But he loves to pull these out, and we'll sit at the counter. We have this nice big counter and come up with a menu. So I'm pretty lucky. I get to reap the benefit of that hobby. Over here is our lovely little breakfast nook, small but mighty, I always say. This table, a little more mod, but I love it. It's very wipeable, as are the rattan chairs. They're also wipeable. And again, we kind of look out to the front area that has the nice landscaping, and it's a nice little place to perch with your coffee in the morning, kind of gather your thoughts. And we have most of our dinners with our son here at the end of the day, which is really nice. If we move over here, you'll see we also have these really great glass cabinets with a lot of glassware. He collects the cookbooks, I collect the glassware. And they're all different. Some are, again, like champagne flutes from our wedding, and then others are, I found these vintage goblets right here that had a J in them, and I just thought that was so cool. So they were meant to be ours, and I brought them home. This really sweet silver tea set that I found in Paris, and I just had to have it. And it sits there, and it's just beautiful. And some vintage champagne coupes. I love anything out of a coupe, so they're part of the collection as well. Another element that we changed was all of the cabinet hardware. Very simple change to make, especially if, luckily, we had single hole cabinet knobs. But what was here before was this almost like a plastic. I don't know. It was not very good. And we put in nice polished nickel hardware to work with our polished nickel faucet, and I think it marries beautifully with the marble counters and then the glazed brick backsplash for a very classic clean kitchen. I would say that I probably loved design before I knew that I could love design. I've always been creative, and growing up, I was surrounded by some pretty strong-minded and creative and sort of home-focused women. So my maternal grandmother was a portrait artist, and she had a great eye for color and a flair for kind of unusual things, pretty things, just whatever. She just had a really good eye for putting things together. And growing up, we always went to her home for Christmas, and she made a point of setting a beautiful table and really making the house just welcoming and pretty and well appointed. And my paternal grandmother, she was actually an antique dealer. So she also kept a very well appointed home. And she always had these beautiful objects and art and furniture pieces. And from her, I didn't know at the time, but I started to observe all these things together. Then fast forward, and my mother actually studied architectural and historic preservation. So growing up, I was around that and all of her architect friends and her historic preservation friends, real estate people. And so it was always around me. So I think it just kind of was second nature to always be thinking about homes and how we live in them, how they fit in our community. And then going forward later in life, I didn't realize that was, something that other people don't naturally think about. So I went off to school. I got a very practical degree. I went to school in Nashville. I went to Vanderbilt University, and then I moved to New York City, and I met my now husband there, who was from Nashville. I did super corporate things, not what I'm doing now. And when we hit our New York expiration date, we thought, okay, we love Nashville, so we'll go back and we'll live there. And we did, and we bought a house, and I slowly started fixing it up, and I really enjoyed it. I just had so much fun kind of doing it on the side. And my friends started noticing that I could do it. And so they would ask me to come over and help them with their living room or their dining room or whatever they were struggling with. And I thought, sure, I'll do it. So one day I was in my friend's dining room. She's very to the point, and I'm standing there holding this napkin on the wall. It's just the perfect shade of blue, and we're going to figure out how to make this all work. And she just looked at me deadpan and said, "Why don't you do this for a living?" And I didn't have an answer. Nobody had ever asked me that. It hadn't really been presented to me as a profession. And so I thought, I just didn't have an answer. And so I sort of did my soul searching a little bit, and I decided, you know what? I'm going to go back to school. I'm going to give this a go. Worst case, I don't like it, I go back to something else. Well, I went back to Omar College of Design, which is now part of Belmont in Nashville, and I loved it. All of it. So I ended up starting my own business in Nashville, and the rest is history. So, and when we moved here, I just kind of moved my business here, and I still have an outpost there in Nashville. So I've just been building ever since, and it's been really, really fun. And here is our downstairs powder room. It is a little jewel box of a room. It's barely 5 by 5. When we moved in, it was kind of a muddy yellow, and it had this strange brown tile on the floor. It just didn't have much life in it. And so I just started over. I put in this pretty tile floor, a little hex Carrera, a pedestal sink, and this really beautiful wallpaper. This neighborhood that we're in is called Boulevard Oaks, and we have all these beautiful oak trees. So I felt like this was just like the perfect nod to the neighborhood we're in and where our house is situated. And I put this pretty blue. I just wrapped all the trim and the ceiling and everything in this complementary color. And you'll notice the mirror in there, the little petite Louis Philippe. I found that at Round Top, which is a really wonderful antique fair outside of Houston, for those of you who are in the know. And the art on the wall, again, kind of our bit of collecting put in here. The two pieces above the toilet are Cape Cod Artists, which is a place where our family actually goes in the summer. So it's nice to have that nod in here. And then the artist on this wall is actually Paul Colvin. He's a kind of mid-century artist, and my mother gave us that. And I think it looks really wonderful in there. Great, now let's head upstairs and I'll show you our primary bedroom. Here we are in our primary bedroom. I love this room. It is very calming and serene and soothing. When pulling this room together, very quickly after we moved in, or when we looked at the house really, the one thing that really stood out to me was the fact that this room has 5 windows and we have a lot of trees around us. So actually, when you come in the spring, we're kind of in Houston's version of winter right now. So our crepe myrtle has no blooms on it, but when it is lush and green, we have that plus all these oak trees around us, and it feels a little bit like you're up in your own little tree house, and you just have all this nice kind of restorative green around you, which is really nice. So I wanted to sort of carry that in here, and I brought in a lot of these watery kind of blues and greens. So it's like a little nature, water, air, greenery. And I think that the net result is a very soothing space. The walls are this really pretty kind of pale aqua blue. Aqua might sound a little bright. Pretty headboard and a carried joist fabric. My favorite Matouk bedding has served me so well. And these really beautiful silk drapery, which, you know, kind of have a little bit of an iridescence to them. And so they have sort of adds to that kind of watery, soothing effect. I love that I was able to put this in here. This is actually my grandmother, the antique dealer. This was her desk, and I keep a little studio, an office studio outside of the house. So sometimes when I come home and I just need like a place to perch and look at emails, I'm often here, and I can hide all kinds of papers and stuff in the drawers below, which is really nice. The chair I found in Paris on my lovely trip, where I acquired things I thought I would sell to clients, and then I ended up keeping them for myself. And I took this fabric, this really nice cotton and tout, and I repeated it in a few places. So although it's not kind of the green that's around us, it's still very organic and earthy, and I think it adds to that whole, again, kind of serene, restorative, like kind of nature effect. Another piece I love in here is this piece of art, this piece of very contemporary art. This room is very traditional, I think, you know, lots of antiques, but again, I always like to inject a little bit of something contemporary and kind of fun. And someone once told me they thought this painting looked like, you know, you were kind of trying to finish a thought that was getting away, and that always stuck with me. So I sometimes look at it and when I'm thinking, I'm like, where's the thought that's going away? So I love having that in here, and it's contemporary, but it's still calming to me. I have this beautiful antique commode that has this really pretty brass detailing. So although it's an older piece, I think that little finishing touch kind of is a little bit of a modern finish to it. I have some vintage alabaster lamps, antique mirror, these beautiful colored engravings that I think work so well with the colors in here. And this is where really every day I kind of finish my morning getting ready. So I'll spritz of perfume, check my jewelry, and then I can be out the door. And the last thing I want to show you in this room is this wall. It's pretty much the largest wall we have to display something in here, given that we have all these windows. And this is an antique divider panel that my grandmother had, one of my grandmothers. I don't know what it is. It looks like Zubair. I'll never know, and that's fine. I just love it. But it's got this wonderful green kind of landscape scene with the watery element at the bottom and the trees. And I just feel like it just sort of completes the circle of the treehouse that we are in up here. And they sit over these lovely stools that I think are just so chic that I found. Another Paris find, and they're in a kind of nubby Pierre Fray boucle fabric. My favorite thing about this home that is not really a concrete, tangible thing we did bring home our babies in this home. So our two lovely children, I have a son that's almost 5 and a daughter that just turned 1. And this home is where we started our family. So that is probably my number one favorite thing about this home. From a design standpoint, probably my favorite thing about the house isn't one singular element, but it's the fact that I do love old homes. So I love that this home is an older home, but we have made it a really easy place to live in a modern way. So we've married, the lovely historic or architectural elements that I referenced before with, all the modern kitchen things. So I love that we've fused those and still can live in something that's got a little bit of a soul in it. And now here we are in my son's room. He is about to turn 5. And this room, he's lucky, this is a really big room. And that meant we got to do twin beds. These were actually my sister and my twin beds when we were younger. And so very lucky I get to use them right now. But I just went real sweet boy in here. So it's a lot of blue and white and red. In his nursery, I had this scarf, which you'll see in a minute. It's this really lovely Hermes scarf framed with hot air balloons and little planes. And so I kind of went with the airspace theme and a little bit of a red, white, and blue. And so we have, just our blue and white gingham and our airplanes, and then my sweet old beds, blue and white striped rug, and beautiful chair over here. And then this bow front chest was actually in my husband's family, and it's nice that we can use it for him. Above it is the scarf that used to be in his nursery, and we just brought it in here and made it part of his new room. And now you've seen my son's room, so let's go take a look at my daughter's nursery. And here we are in my daughter's nursery. As you can see, this room is very girly. I didn't go outright pink. We've got this really, really lovely blue and green kind of viney sweet pea wallpaper. But although we've got blue flowers, I do have plenty of pink. We have, our fun floral bedding on her crib and as well as on the bed. The bed was also an antique bed that was my grandmother's, and I recovered it in this really sweet blue ticking. On the wall here, you'll see a portrait that is actually my grandmother's. And that is who I am named after, as well as my daughter. So it's really fitting that she's in here. Over here, we just have a few little sweet things, lovely pink lampshade, vintage mirror, all very floral and just very feminine, but without being overly girly. One other thing over here that I think is really fun to point out, it took me a while to figure out what to put on this wall, but I found, again, my friend Jessica Love, she just finds these wonderful antique things, and these are 19th century hand watercolored botanicals, and I think they are fabulous in here. In addition to, right over the crib, I found these drawings, these fashion drawings in Paris like years ago on my first trip to Paris with my family when I was much younger, and I just thought they were so cool. And then they kind of floated around in my house, and I didn't have a place for them until now. And so I think that they're just perfect in here for a little girl's room. The drapery actually are part of why we do have some blue in here. I had them when this was my son's nursery, and the walls were wallpapered in a blue linen. And I knew that I loved what I did with the drapery with this little Greek key design in the corners with this double tape. And I couldn't bear to part with them, so I found this beautiful floral wallpaper that just worked with it so well and just turned the boy drapery into the girl drapery. Home, again, at the end of the day, it's just a place that brings you comfort and joy and nourishment. So it's a crazy world we live out there. There's a lot of noise around us. And I think it is so important to have that place that it doesn't have to be grand or anything, but if it gives you comfort, it brings you joy, and the surroundings can nourish you in some way, I think that's the best combo right there. Well, Homeworthy, it's been so much fun showing you around, but it's time for me to go. Until next time.
watching. Be sure to go to homeworthy.com for exclusive content, shopping guides, and so much more.